Welcome to Decentralised Minds. I'm your host, Harry Davis, and today we're joined by Ross Power from Cheqd.
Ross, if you want to just give a bit of a brief introduction to yourself, who you are, what you do, it'd be great.
Hey, yeah, great to be here. I'm Ross Power. I'm product manager at Cheqd. Been at Cheqd for roughly 2 years, pretty much just after since we launched back in April, May 2021.
Awesome. Well, we've got, there's probably going to be a few questions around what exactly Cheqd are, what you guys do. So I'll let you kind of fire away with those. Obviously, hopefully incorporating a little bit of knowledge around self-sovereign identity, because there's probably a few viewers, including myself, who had a few questions around what exactly it was a couple of years ago. But now, obviously, having worked with you for some time, I've got a little bit more of an idea.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people are still wondering, because they're starting to see it pop up all over the crypto space. But if you could give a bit of info around what it is and what you're trying to achieve, that'd be awesome.
Yeah, so I guess we'll start with self-sovereign identity and then lead into what Cheqd is actually doing within the space and just explain like what self-sovereign identity is. And likewise, when I joined Cheqd 2 years ago, or almost 2 years ago, I was new to self-sovereign identity as well, like pretty new to it. It was kind of like a whole space that I had to learn. I had to try and figure out the best way to understand it myself and then communicate it to people I was recruiting or people that I was trying to like teach what it was all about. But I guess the general way to try and understand things is it's all about how kind of your data is currently managed in the current kind of Web 2 world versus like the Web 3 world, or the way that data could be managed. And so there's one kind of like quote which is quite commonly used, which is basically that the internet was essentially built without an identity layer. And essentially when you look at kind of like the tech stack of the internet, what you kind of see is that you have like apps nowadays and apps across like the Web 2 kind of era that were all built at the application layer. So Facebook, Google, all the kind of largest like Web 2 organizations were essentially built at this kind of Web 2 application layer. And as a result, identity kind of got like bundled up in that layer. And so what you kind of see is like all your ways of managing identity generally get managed at kind of that application layer. And so when you kind of look at Web 1, Web 2, then Web 3, what happens is in Web 1, you had kind of that sort of login with your username and password, and you ended up with like thousands of different logins to that. Yeah. And then what happened in Web 2 is then Web 2 came along in terms of like Facebook and Google and all these different kind of ways of logging in, and it's kind of generally called federated identity. And federated identity is any point at that time where you go to log in and it says log in with Google, log in with Facebook, log in with X. And with that, you kind of log in with those kind of platforms. And as you're doing that, you're kind of logging in, and then you're basically giving away your data for them to kind of to take hold of and do that with. So Web3 is trying to make a new kind of way of basically making it possible for you to log in with you. So like you just log in with your own credentials. You log in with kind of like the information you have using your wallet and using kind of credentials that have been issued to you. So how self-sovereign identity works, like I guess breaking down that term, like self-sovereign identity. So sovereign is basically all kind of like around like ruling. So like you have a sovereign government, you have a sovereign state, all about kind of the rule. Self-sovereign is essentially like self-ruling. So like you are self-ruling your own identity. And so that's where kind of the name comes from. It's not the sexiest name, I don't think. I don't think like self-sovereign identity has had the kind of like
it's the not ring been, to it.
It's not been picked up like the NFT got picked up or like different things got picked up, because the name does sound quite confusing. And I think there's been like there's other terms that have come about in the last couple of years, like self-managed identity. There's some people pushing this idea of like ID tech as just like this overall term, like fintech, ID tech. But self-sovereign identity, basically, the key thing is that your data is basically managed in your wallet. And so how it basically works is issuers of data. So if you think of it like a university might be issuing you a credential to say that you've kind of like passed your university course. So in the current way, the university will issue that certificate, probably as a PDF, probably something that you'll go and store in your Finder window, or you'll go lose in a drawer, or whatever you might do with it. Same with your AS certificates, A-level certificates, probably lose them. And then at some point, you'll kind of take that certificate, and then say you apply for a job, or you're going to a recruitment company. I apply for a job, and then that company will say, okay, we need to go do a background check and check that this person genuinely has that certificate.
Yeah.
And so the background checking company, which generally charges quite a lot for doing this, they'll basically go around and do kind of like a KYC check. So they'll say, send us your certificates and we'll go do all the checking and working that out.
Yeah.
And so they kind of become the intermediary within the kind of identity system there. And like, I guess with everything, it's all about disintermediating. So like removing the need for an intermediary.
Yeah.
And so how it works with self-sovereign identity is when the university issues you your university certificate, rather than you then kind of like holding that certificate and then a background checking company having to come and like figure that out, they issue that certificate. And when they do that, they sign it with what's called a digital signature or a decentralized identifier. And that decentralized identifier, but you can literally just think of it as like a signature.
Okay.
That's stored on the blockchain. And so when the company that's wanting to come and check if you like genuinely have the certificate wants to come and check that document, that credential, all they're basically doing is they're looking at that credential, which you present to them, whether it's like an app or you just share it with them, and then that verifier, that receiver of that credential, basically looks up that digital signature on the blockchain, checks that it is indeed issued by the correct university, and then they're able to make that kind of like confirmation. And so it kind of like removes the need for these intermediaries. And that university example is basically, you can think of that with pretty much anything, like any document you could ever receive.
Awesome. Well, it's like,
so, yeah.
I mean, like we mentioned before I think we started, I'm not sure if we even recorded it, but because obviously we're, as a recruitment business, we come across a lot of candidates who not only lie about their experience and where they are, like location-wise, but also kind of university and things like that. Not necessarily in the UK or Europe, but like over in the States, it's just like a massive, massive issue.
Yeah.
Particularly if we're dealing with some of these larger organizations or within finance who want people from these kind of red brick sort of universities and the top unis or colleges over in the States. A lot of people end up lying about it because on LinkedIn, you can create, there's nothing there. You can just create whatever you want. Like I could be a professional mermaid if I wanted to, and they wouldn't do any sort of background checks or anything. So like, I mean, within the recruitment space, it's unbelievable. And I think again, even within the crypto space, obviously you've got these influencers or whatever, or say top people in these different businesses. Yes, they might be super knowledgeable or famous on Twitter or LinkedIn or something like that, but then you get someone approaching you via Telegram or jumping into a Discord group, and then you don't know whether or not that is the legitimate person who you're having a conversation with, and then it just causes a whole big pile of mess basically.
It is.
It's chaos.
It's a nightmare, and I think it's just popping up more and more. Like I think something that happened recently is a candidate basically claimed to have worked for Cheqd, and and literally like I think it was like some really weird series of events. So you guys contacted us and said, hey, like, did this person work for Cheqd? And we were like, never seen this name before in our lives.
And Fraser posted it on LinkedIn.
Yeah, but then it was almost weirder than that, because then one of your colleagues followed up with them and said, hey, like, can you give us any more information because we can't verify this? And then somehow they managed to respond and say, yes, I worked underneath Ross Power, who was a product manager for Cheqd, and I did all this, I did this various work. And then I was like curious. So I went to his LinkedIn profile and like word for word, like he nailed somehow the work that he like, that role would have apparently done. Like it was probably a candidate that also you helped us find.
Yeah.
Who's our lead engineer. Literally pretty much word for word just explained what he'd done. But the irony was that his dates didn't match up, and he said he'd done it about 3 months before we'd actually done it.
Oh God.
So it was like just this weird thing event, and like so like LinkedIn is it's just got so many issues like that.
It's mad. So one of the questions I mentioned to you earlier around a new guy who's been working for us, a gentleman called Rowan. He had a question around kind of, could this be used within, or could people actually start using, for instance, NFTs as their identity, and would all of the checks and everything be incorporated with that particular NFT? Is that going to be something that can come through? Or
like there's kind of, I wouldn't say they're competing because they're actually so different in terms of technology, but NFTs, as they've come kind of like evolved, there's been more and more people that are that are building organizations, building companies to say that NFTs actually can be used for your identity.
Yeah.
And through like the big NFT craze, like you saw a lot of NFTs actually already being used for identity. So because they basically, like, as much as they're a cool thing to have, there's obviously a reason. Like either they appreciate, so people think NFTs is a tool for appreciating and gaining value and mooning and stuff, or a tool for access. And so a lot of what the Bored Ape Club NFT's got, or like all the stuff, a lot of the stuff that like I think it's Yoma Labs, might be getting the name wrong, but
Yoga.
a lot Yoga Labs.
Yuga Labs. Sorry, I should know that.
But a lot of
Labs.
those like projects basically give you access, and so I think once you hold the NFT, then you can get into a Discord channel, and when you get into the Discord channel, then as a result, I can then find out about the next NFT that's going to give me access, and then it's alpha, and so all that stuff. So I think they generally were doing some form of identity, but I think generally we feel that like NFTs don't offer a really like trusted, verifiable way of managing identity because they're transferable, because you can basically, one NFT can be transferred to another. They're not tied to any one user. Whereas verifiable credentials they're tied to the user's DID key, but they're basically tied to an individual. They basically, you can't transfer them in the same way. And there's also like a new craze or a new thing that's been brought to Ethereum called soulbound tokens. Yeah. So soulbound tokens are kind of like almost a step between NFTs and verifiable credentials, which is what the credentials I mentioned earlier are. But so soulbound tokens, again, they have some issues. They're not necessarily, don't have the very same like verifiability, same trust. It's difficult to kind of like have that same level of like assurance in them. And they also can be dropped in your wallet at will quite freely. So I mean, Anchor, our CTO, kind of has a thought of various quite good analogies for this, but basically like, it's sort of like you can just like drop like a virus, like you can just like drop these sort of like NFTs basically into someone's wallet, and they can't necessarily reject or approve it. Right. And so the things that we're doing, and we're trying to demonstrate, okay, if this is your identity, that you're managing it, you should have the right to what goes in your wallet. Imagine if you're walking down the street and someone just like shoved stuff in your wallet. Yeah. You'd be like, no.
Is that similar to, I know loads of kind of startup, whether or not it's NFT companies or new tokens being released, they often just send a boatload of the tokens to Vitalik's wallet, and they call it like, oh, he's holding this, or they almost call it a burning wallet. Yeah. I suppose, because it's a similar sort of thing, because you can just, I can send, so if I had your wallet address.
Yeah, you can send me.
I can send you anything.
Feel free. Yeah, thanks to me.
I'll send you some Cheqd tokens.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. So like, you can drop those in people's wallets, and so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of great kind of research that we've done around kind of why NFTs, SBTs, why they kind of like don't have the same sort of like strengths as verifiable credentials, and the new product that we're kind of working on beneath Cheqd is kind of one of our new products within our suite of products that leverages the actual network itself, which I should probably explain in more detail. That kind of is there to demonstrate how individuals can actually hold verifiable credentials and use them for different purposes.
Yeah, awesome. Well, before we delve into the new product that's coming through or has just been released, let's talk about the Cheqd token a little bit. What's exactly, kind of for the viewers and stuff, what is the Cheqd token actually used for?
Yeah, so I talked about kind of like self-sovereign identity and how that kind of works. And one of the key things is that you have a blockchain, which is a choice of verifiable data registry. Yeah. But it can be other things, but blockchain is kind of largely agreed as like the most effective way of doing it, where you basically store this thing called a decentralized identifier on it. And so as an issuer of data, so say I was an organization, a university, I'm going to create a decentralized identifier, and then that identifier basically goes on chain. And so the Cheqd blockchain is essentially where that identifier is stored. And so anytime someone issues a credential, they use that identifier to sign it.
Got ya.
And so the Cheqd blockchain basically, kind of our intention is basically to onboard different issuers, of all sorts from different use cases, whether that's kind of supply chain, consumer credit scores, universities, education, huge range of different things, medical certificates, onboard those issuers to the network, have them issue credentials, and then help them to kind of build products that enable them to have like issuers and verifiers and holders kind of all in having a relationship. And our intention basically is to build what we're calling a trusted data marketplaces. And trusted data marketplaces basically is a marketplace for this trusted data to be exchanged. So verifiers and issuers can basically have a relationship where they're able to have a direct sort of payment between them based on the verification of these kind of verifiable credentials. Yeah. And so, I mean, the Cheqd token itself is basically used both as a means of kind of securing the network as a proof of stake network. The Cheqd token basically enables us to have like the validators being kind of rewarded and recognized for their kind of service to the network in terms of running a node. And we're using the Cosmos SDK to do that. But then the Cheqd token was also used as the payment mechanism for this exchange of verifiable credentials.
Yeah.
So it's basically, we're calling it like the payment rails for self-sovereign identity. And so the token is used as a means of kind of like paying for identity transactions on the network.
And are you actually targeting a specific sort of area, whether or not it's like recruitment, for instance, with LinkedIn, or also hiring people in general, or maybe gambling or any particular niche, or even within the medical space, it could be really good for like medical records or anything like that. I had a chat with Anchor actually about hippo consent a couple of weeks ago.
Nice.
To see how we can incorporate into that.
Yeah.
But no, is there any sort of area that you're really kind of focusing on, or is it just like get all the basics sorted and then we can then start approaching?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, the initial intention as an organization, like after launch, was basically partner with a lot of the organizations who are building the apps for this industry, because we basically were sitting at the infrastructure level. So like in non-technical terms, if you think of kind of like the stack of like banking stack, for example, at the base, you have things like MasterCard and Visa, and then you do get a step deeper than that. And then as you go up the stack, you have things like Starling, Monzo, other banks exist. And so basically, we were first at that kind of payment infrastructure level, building that kind of initial network. And then our intention was to partner with the organizations building the apps themselves. Okay. And we were kind of like we were not specific about what use cases they were looking at. We were focusing on finding those partners. And now we've got kind of 45 of those leading self-sovereign identity vendors. So roughly 70% of the market, although we've like the remaining percentage of the market we're in quite like good discussions with as well. And so now we've got those partners. We're now looking to see, okay, can we both work with our partners with their existing use cases and their existing customers, but then also can we go out and directly find our own use cases as well, and bring those to our partners. And so a good example of something that we're looking at quite deeply at is to do with like consumer credit scores and basically porting the Web 2 credit scores into Web 3.
Okay.
Which is quite interesting. So
is that going to be almost incorporated to DeFi and?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So like obviously across the world, basically, more and more people are building up credit, or building up not necessarily credit, but they're building up strong scores in terms of their management of their crypto investments, whether that's like staking, involved in liquidity pools, like all these different things that you can kind of like get involved in, like crypto and liquidity across the ecosystem, but they're not necessarily able to like gain any credit for doing so.
See, is there actually? Yeah, I was going to say, is there actually like a credit score or Experian for Web3?
No, and not yet. There's nothing like that kind of exists. And verifiable credentials and this idea of these trusted data marketplaces really becomes quite a good opportunity for that, because the verifiable credential basically would be issued to an individual based on kind of different activity. They're able to build their credit up. That credit score is kind of tied to verifiable credentials, which can be verified by the receiver of the identity. And then you basically have kind of quite a clean relationship where you're able to prove to a lender, for example, that's like, that's providing the credit. You're able to prove to them quite clearly this person has actually built quite a trusted, verifiable credit score or credit history in the crypto ecosystem. Then we can also tie that with their Web 2 credit score. And then actually it gives them a whole new market of people to provide lending to that they might not have otherwise have had access. And one of the cool things about that, and one of the reasons I went into crypto, was to do with kind of financial inclusion and kind of bringing technology to emerging countries, and being able to provide kind of credit and lending and saving opportunities for people in kind of emerging economies is actually quite a powerful use of crypto.
Definitely. Yeah, because it'd be good to chat about, because obviously I've got your background. You've worked for consultancy firms and whatnot in the past, and then taken the big plunge into Web3. Was it Accenture? I didn't even have a look. Accenture that you were working with, but although you were kind of doing some blockchain and stuff, and you were even a recruitment consultant before.
Yeah, I was at. I mean, I don't know how much to go into about me, but I was when I was at uni, I kind of was studying politics, international relations.
Yeah.
And then I got really interested I started looking at microfinance for my dissertation, and I was studying kind of the sub-Saharan African politics and emerging economies and things like that. Looked at microfinance, realized there was loads of holes in the way that microfinance is being done, and some pretty hideous stories about how kind of like people were, the interest rates that were set and things like that.
Yeah.
And so then I started understanding a bit more about like direct cash transfers and just enabling more like trusted relationships where you actually just trust someone to spend the money rather than having like conditions and things like that being met and stuff. So I kind of gradually found my way into blockchain and tech quite randomly, like having not really been interested in tech and so forth when I was growing up, and then like ended up going to Accenture for 3 years on the graduate program, and then focusing pretty much all in on blockchain, which is where I met Fraser and Anka, the co-founders of Cheqd, who were both just like, they were both just like the people to chat to in blockchain at Accenture at the time. Like,
Definitely.
They were both, they're kind of like the young up and coming blockchain gurus at Accenture. Like Anka was doing some great projects with, can't say their names probably, but Anka was doing some great projects, and like quite quickly, I think I went to a blockchain conference, met Anka, and then like he just like quite quickly sort of like took me under his wing, gave me a lot of mentoring and guidance. And then through then sort of kind of was introduced to Fraser and so forth. So
Awesome.
yeah.
No, Anka's he's a good guy, isn't he?
Yeah.
And you can chat to him for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah, I'm yet to find something Anka doesn't
That's
know
what I was about to say.
Yeah.
Like he literally, like no matter what I can bring up in a conversation with him, he'll know the answer.
Yeah.
So when I spoke to him about the medical tech stuff a couple of weeks ago, he just gave me not only just a boatload of knowledge and answers to a load of questions that I had, but then followed up with an endless amount of links and a full almost essay of like everything that I could have possibly wanted to know, even without me even knowing the question. So it was just, he's a freak of nature and an absolute legend. No, he's a great guy.
Yeah.
Well, new product,
Yep.
Creds.
Yeah.
Talk to us.
So, Creds is kind of our kind of step into looking at kind of get more close to our consumers and more closer to the people that are actually kind of like involved in the crypto space, in the Web3 space, but not necessarily issuers and people building their SSI apps themselves. So generally, like we've been spending a lot of our time speaking to like self-sovereign identity developers, organizations that are kind of working with companies to basically build these products that I kind of mentioned the different use cases there. But as we've kind of developed within the Cosmos ecosystem specifically, but also just generally across Web3, we've realized that there's quite a strong opportunity for verifiable credentials across basically enabling people to build a reputation that can be trusted, that can be verified, and that can go cross-chain and be portable and go wherever you want to go. And there's quite a few like reasons that we kind of like evolved in understanding it, but essentially Creds you can think of as a platform or a portal for you to basically manage various different credentials that you would collect within the kind of the Web3 space.
Yeah.
And we're basically onboarding organizations, and we're kind of just about to go into a private beta where we're basically onboarding organizations from across the Cosmos ecosystem. Who will be issuers of verifiable credentials, and they'll bring in their community members. So, these communities have upwards of 5,000-10,000 people. Obviously, active members varies, but they'll bring in those community members and they'll issue them credentials. And then in return of kind of issuing them credentials, they'll give them the opportunity for both access, kind of as I talked about, but also being able to use those credentials for being able to like reward them for activity and so forth. So it's a bit to do with like gamification, incentivizing people.
Because that's what I was going to, almost around the gaming side of things, you can see where it really starts to play into the kind of field. Because I think I was watching, something popped up on my random YouTube channel or something came up. Just mentioning how you could get someone who's playing, I mean, I don't play that, I don't actually have a games console, but someone who's playing, say, Call of Duty that comes across to another game, and then it's like, right, okay, they can say they're all this and that, but then if you've got the credentials and everything to then verify it, and also, again, with people's LinkedIn's or like profiles like that, and then also taking things from someone's Discord and then
just kind of like, with you.
Yeah, you can take that with you. to really show that you actually know what you're talking about.
Yeah, for sure. I think gaming itself as an industry is something that we've seen a few times that could be quite interesting.
Yeah.
Creds isn't specifically like going after gaming, but we're not kind of like adverse to gaming as well. Like we think gaming is actually like a really good opportunity. And some of the conversations we've had is like, I want to build up, like it's a great example actually. I want to be able to build up my reputation within this game and build up my XP and build up the fact that I've got these great skins and great like weapons or whatever the game is kind of offering, and then be able to go to a new game and be able to like demonstrate that and be able to kind of maybe claim like a relatively similar like level of reward
Rather than starting again.
rather than starting from fresh every time. And so and verifiable credentials just offer a really like nice portable way of doing so. And same with things like being able to have, you know, an identity within gaming as well that you can kind of like that's verifiable and stuff like that, because, you know, not someone that games a huge amount, but I'm sure there's also like, you know, fake profiles that pop up in gaming, and there's probably there's a significant scamming and so forth. So yeah.
Good. But how long as well has Creds actually been in the making? Like from idea to
I think
now becoming a reality.
I had this conversation earlier. I think there was always an intention somewhat, like, you know, Fraser and Anchor, like, well, early on had an intention. We had conversations around like how can we use these, you know, verifiable credentials for reputation within Web3. Like that is definitely a cool thing to do, and it's definitely a missing piece within like the ecosystem for sure. But like we really started stepping it up and really going more into it from around like September last year, where we started to go, okay, is there something here which could genuinely be like fun to build, could be very related to our tech stack, help us to demonstrate what we're actually doing as an organization, and actually solve a lot of the problems. And the problems that we saw at the beginning aren't necessarily the same problems as we're seeing now. So like one of the things that we were quite keen on doing with Creds from the off was trying to tackle like fraudulent behavior around scamming and bots using things like Telegram and Discord. And so the thing you mentioned earlier was an airdrop, where an organization, normally new crypto companies, will launch, and they'll basically want to build their name, get people understanding what they do. And the best way to do that in the crypto space is to kind of like to send some tokens to someone's wallet. And so an airdrop basically, like there's like different airdrop mechanics tools, but we ran an airdrop, and what we were intending to do is basically find people in the Cosmos ecosystem and start rewarding them for kind of doing different activity, both on-chain and off-chain. And so like the activity might be like, go check out our Twitter, like follow us, give us a like on like a tweet or two, join our Telegram community, engage in those kind of sort of like off-chain, more social activity things. And then also more on-chain, like go and stake on, say, Osmosis, different platforms, go stake Atom, go stake some Cheqd. And based on all of these things, we're going to give you a reward for doing so in the form of Cheqd tokens. And so, you know, we were relatively new as a team to this kind of space in terms of it, and we basically didn't realize the scale of scamming that existed within airdrops until we were the victims of it. And so we managed to like start to piece together in a bit of a sort of a post-mortem investigation forensics into this. And Javid, our CFO, is just phenomenal, and Fraser, phenomenal at Excel. And so we just ended up finding different things, but we just realized we had like 20,000, I think it was 20 to 25,000 fraudulent attempts at trying to get the tokens from us. So this was 5 to 10,000 fake Twitter profiles, Telegram profiles, people creating multiple wallets and splitting up tokens, and then like doing all these different things to try and like basically get more of an airdrop. And to be honest, like you can't blame some people in some ways. People are gonna, if there's an opportunity for you to get an extra little buck, then you're going to do it.
But with the Arbitrum airdrop that came through, I mean, I know people who've set up 10 different wallets across different browsers, different computers, all sorts, just to gain more. And they're sat there almost like farming. They're just playing with the protocols, interacting with everything.
And that's where it becomes quite difficult, because if you want to do an airdrop, you want to find ways to actually recognize people who are genuinely useful rather than just anyone. But that's quite difficult for projects to do. And so one of the kind of the use cases of Creds is basically to offer a tool, a solution for people to run airdrops with.
Yeah.
And so we've got 7 different credential types that we're kind of going with initially, which we're kind of testing out. So like social profile ones, which is basically being able to authenticate your Discord, Twitter, Telegram, different profiles basically. And you can get a credential to say, okay, I'm the actual holder of that account. Which basically just adds a secondary step to make it just slightly more difficult to basically go off and start creating loads and loads of accounts and things like that.
Yeah.
And then you've got things like role credentials. So I'm a member of the Cheqd team. I'm a member of the...
Quite useful.
Yeah, exactly. Those kind of things. I mean, that's one of the things that we knew from the off. Like there was so many people popping up. Like we had fake Rosses, fake Javids, fake Frasers. Like one of the weird things that happened is there was a time where Javid and Fraser were put into a Discord group with someone to talk about some sort of like a listing of some form. So Javid and this person were speaking to Fraser, and they both thought they were in conversation on Discord. So they're having this conversation, and then the Fraser in this group said to Javid something, and it just didn't seem logical that Fraser would say that because they'd just come off a call. It was like, this doesn't make sense. And then Fraser was speaking to a Javid and this other person, and Fraser was like, that's not how Javid would, that's not how he would speak, and that doesn't make sense because we just were on a call together.
Yeah.
And so they hopped on a call quite quickly, and they were like, what are you talking about, basically? I mean, I wasn't there, but they were like, what is going on here? And then they looked at it and they realized Javid and someone were speaking to a fake Fraser, and Fraser and someone were speaking to a fake Javid. And so we were like this web of just like stuff. And then you go and look in more detail, and there's just like a tiniest different thing, and like the username is just very slightly different.
Yeah.
But it's not enough, like if you're busy, if you're doing things quickly. And so we wanted to straight away, and that was one of the early credentials that we thought would be interesting. Like we really quickly wanted to create an ability for everyone in the Cheqd team to have a credential to say, I'm genuinely a Cheqd team member, a checkmate, as we call ourselves. And then, because we're that cool. and then we've also built, and this is kind of in the works, but build bots for both Telegram and Discord, whereby you can be having a conversation with someone. Say I contacted you, and you were like, something seems strange here. You can forward my message to the bot. The bot will basically go ahead and kind of do a verification check to go and check if I genuinely hold the verifiable credential to say I've authenticated with that Telegram account.
Okay.
And so it kind of becomes a way of kind of preventing fraud and working out, is this genuinely the right person to be speaking to?
Because on the surface of things, of like self-sovereign identity, it's, now that you're talking about it in more detail, the more use cases there are, it's actually nuts.
Yeah.
Like on a daily basis, you almost just, especially if you're in crypto and you've been amongst it for a while over the last couple of years, you'll see even people's Twitter accounts. There's, if an influencer posts something, if you go down into the comments, the first comment will be a bot with a scammer with a slightly different kind of username or anything like that.
It's weird.
And it's just constant.
Yeah. I followed this guy the other day on Instagram or something, and then I went on my Instagram and I was like, he's following me back? And I was like, I was a bit chuffed with myself. And then he followed me back again, and then I got like 9 follows, all with the same profile picture.
Oh,
and then
God.
I was like, and then I went on it, and this guy has 9 fake Instagram accounts that follow me now. All of them just fake ones. And like, it must be someone's creating a bot, which basically, if you follow this account, they'll follow you back. They'll think you followed them. And all you have to do is, I mean, it's pretty quick. You go and check, okay, all of their pictures have been created in the last week, probably fake. But
that's not something that
it's not the
majority of people are going to do to verify. They'll get a new person out, then they're like, cool, they'll might accept them.
And it's not verifiable, like, and that's the thing with social, and that's where we do think like Creds will be integrated. And LinkedIn has actually, in the last couple of weeks, integrated verifiable credentials into their platform because it's part of Microsoft. It's
very
not
much needed.
Yeah.
I mean, we've sent so many, like, not complaints, but like flags to LinkedIn, and I don't know what they do, because a lot of the fake accounts they'll just change the name or change the location of that account, and it's just like, or they'll just create another one.
Yeah, it's so
like
easy
they might
to do
delete one, but then you can create a new LinkedIn account within 30 seconds, and you don't have to provide any sort of
and there's no like KYC.
Yeah, there's
nothing.
nothing.
And and then that's obviously another use case, like basically like KYC, like being able to actually do a know your customer check, similar to what you do with kind of banking, but being able to do that more easily. And if you had a wallet, quite simply, like similar to if you had a crypto wallet just on your browser, but you had a wallet that just had this data in it, it wouldn't be hard to just like present this. And going a step further, what we've also just released to the network this week is what we're calling zero knowledge credentials.
Yep.
And so zero knowledge proofs basically is like a big thing within the Web3 space. Zero knowledge proof basically means being able to verify data without necessarily knowing like all the detail, not having to have all the information. So being able to verify someone is over 18 without knowing their birthday, their date of birth, their address, all this information. And so zero knowledge credentials, which we brought to the network, basically enable us to kind of do things on the network like people being able to verify that they're a holder of Cheqd tokens. They hold over, say, 1 million tokens or 10 million tokens, or not that many, hopefully, or over 100,000 tokens.
I wouldn't mind 10 million Cheqd tokens.
Not that many. Over, say, 100,000 tokens. So being able to verify that you're kind of a holder of tokens without saying, this is my wallet address, come find me. And our ambassador community have already like got quite engaged in like coming up with different names for different holders and stuff. So there's often like there's genuine use cases for zero knowledge credentials as well, which so that's kind of the KYC side of it.
Awesome. And what's next? Any new interesting products coming out, or are you not allowed to talk about?
No, we can. So, I mean, Creds is going to evolve quite quickly, hopefully, in terms of what we're doing. I would say that as a product manager, but we want to build like more features into it as we kind of evolve to bring our Cheqd community into having credentials and holding credentials. Then we want to kind of expand to more communities and start to be able to, everyone can have this like sort of cross-chain reputation. And then integrate, kind of introduce a profile. So you being able to have a profile where, you know, it'll be like creds.xyz/rosspower. I can send you that link, and then at any point you can go ahead and see what credentials I'm holding that I've chose to put into the public kind of profile. Okay. And so it quite quickly becomes a bit of like an online CV, because some of the credentials we have there are like endorsements. So I've been endorsed as like a contributor on GitHub, or I've been endorsed as a docs contributor. Or like Albert Bow, we would want to give you a credential to say like you're endorsed as our like trusted sole recruiter, which we obviously have that agreement with you in. So different things like that, which we can all like have on your public profile. And then introducing things like automated issuance. So being able to make it really streamlined from the moment, say an issuer gets onboarded, to be able to issue credentials quite quickly. So say someone goes through a learning journey through something like Crew 3, which is like a learning platform. Being able to complete a learning journey, so you go through, I learn all about, say, self-sovereign identity and the Cheqd network, and then off the back of that, it automatically issues me, based on completing these questions within that platform, auto-issues me a credential. And so in my kind of portal, I can hold my learning credential, my fact I've attended some events, my social profile, like all these things in one place. So that's kind of the key next things for Creds.
Awesome.
And then for Cheqd, basically what I kind of mentioned at the beginning, introducing payment rails to the network more fully. So making it possible for verifiers and issuers to have like an exchange of credentials for payment, and building these trusted data marketplaces around consumer credit scores and various different use cases.
Yeah. Why did you pick Cosmos as well?
That was a decision made largely. I mean, it was both technical and also kind of like from a to an extent from a community perspective as well. Anchor, Fraser, I think, you know, the team, they basically initially, and this was like actually before I joined, did like analysis into like all of the leading chains, and even things looking like GitHub commit history and how much activity was going on. It was quite clear that the Cosmos ecosystem was growing quite like rapidly, and it meant that we felt that there would be like a great ecosystem to join and be a part of and start contributing to. There's also like a very useful aspect of being able to build our own layer one on the network. And so we basically are our own layer one blockchain. And so it means we created our own tokenomics.
Yep.
We have our own governance in place. We have our own kind of token, but we're able to leverage the entire Cosmos ecosystem at the same time. And so Cosmos has something called the IBC, inter-blockchain communication, where you can basically communicate directly with other Cosmos projects and share tokens and send and receive tokens and things like that. But also the underlying Cosmos SDK is kind of constantly being worked on and upgraded, so we can kind of leverage all the work that's being done on that already to kind of like to improve us as well. So there's that aspect, and then also we just thought there was like some really great Cosmos projects out there that we could kind of we wanted to kind of get close to and work closely with. And what's proving is, although it was a bit of a like probably like not the most like likely chain at the time, it wasn't as known. Like almost 2 years in, Cosmos is really gaining some steam fast.
Yeah, it's grown massively because I've got a load of different tokens which are just staked, and I get airdropped all sorts of random things. So yeah, I'm quite heavily involved with Cosmos ecosystem, and I definitely think as ecosystems and blockchains go, and communities, as you mentioned, they are a little bit more lively, and they almost seem to be wanting to help each other build. Whereas if we're speaking to or working with companies on the Ethereum blockchain, they're just competing against everyone, rather than wanting everyone to work together and build a better ecosystem. So it definitely seems like a good place to be building.
Yeah, that's actually been cool with this new product. Like we're in our kind of our research phase, which we're still in. We've been doing like product research interviews with projects, and so far we've spoken to between 25 and 30 projects, and many of them are Cosmos-based projects. And we're talking to them about this kind of Cosmos interchain reputation system, where you can have a reputation that kind of goes portable across the network. And you know, the feedback's been amazing from the Cosmos ecosystem, but also the desire to kind of help and help build it together and not find it like a competitive nature to it. So it's been brilliant. And Cosmoverse is in Istanbul in October, so you should get along to that.
I will. I'll get a ticket. No, it'd be good to go to one of those. I mean, I've been to a few different events. We went to Token 2049 last year, Zebu Live, and then we're kind of toying with the idea about going over to Singapore and a couple over in Dubai. Craig and I, which should be quite fun, but some of them are spenny.
Yeah.
Real spenny.
Have to know what you're there for. But
I mean, for us, we just want to speak to interesting businesses and meet a load of cool people, and we have done. I mean, any events that we go to, particularly the blockchain ones, are the most inviting, open to talk. And like if you go to an event for, say, financial services or trading, gambling, or e-commerce, any other industry, you're only ever speaking to salespeople. Whereas you can actually get to speak to the techie people within blockchain conferences and understand like the underlying technology, what they're trying to achieve. And that's where you actually see the people who are really actually passionate about what they're building. And it becomes a much more interesting conversation rather than having to speak to someone who's just deliberately trying to sell stuff to you.
But I think that's one of the things that Albert Bow, like, you do get right as well. Like the team genuinely understands the project and what we're trying to do, and always kind of like engages quite well, specifically with the job description, whatever it might be, but then also with kind of like the culture of the company as well, and the people that that we've brought in through Albert Bow have been like very much in line with our culture.
Selling it for us here, absolutely love it.
You know it.
He's going to ask for a few beers after this.
Yeah.
No, awesome. Right. I've kind of covered off a lot of the things I wanted to kind of rattle through and talk about. Is there anything you want to cover?
I think we've covered the key points. Yeah.
Awesome.
Good chat.
Well, hey, Ross, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for inviting me.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thanks for listening. I've been your host, Harry Davis, joined by Ross Power from Cheqd.